I kicked off today's story with a realization. Love tricks you into believing in stuff that's not even real. When I tied the knot with Margaret, I was convinced she was my soulmate, the one I'd been searching for, and I figured our bond was rock solid. Something totally unique compared to those couples who just grow apart over time. I kept telling myself we were different, stronger, more genuine than the rest, and for a good chunk of my life, I bought into that idea wholeheartedly. Falling in love wasn't something I did on a whim. I'd always been the careful type, holding back, measuring out how much of myself I'd let someone have. But Margaret? She flipped that script entirely, or at least, that's how it seemed to me back then. The second I met her, she reeled me in effortlessly, like some kind of magnetic force I couldn't resist. Her laugh was contagious, lighting up the room, and she had this knack for turning even the dullest moments into something thrilling and alive. She brought spontaneity to my life, a spark of unpredictability, and whenever her eyes locked on mine, I felt like I was the only guy who mattered in the universe. So, I handed her my whole heart. Everything I had, I poured into her. She became the center of my universe, my dreams, my future. Every plan I made started and ended with keeping her happy. I bent over backwards for her, making sacrifices left and right, big ones and little ones alike, just to see her smile. If she needed me by her side, I dropped everything to be there. If she wanted something, I'd move mountains to make it happen. For years, I genuinely thought she was matching my effort, that we were in this together, building something unbreakable. But now, looking back with clear eyes, I see it plain as day. I was never her top priority. She just loved being mine. The shift didn't hit like a lightning bolt, though. That's what folks don't get about relationships. They don't always crash and burn in some loud, messy showdown. Sometimes they just slip away, bit by bit, so quiet you don't notice until you're left staring at the wreckage of what you thought was forever. The clues were there all along, hiding in plain sight. Margaret never put in the same energy I did. I'd go all out, planning candlelit dinners, whisking her off for surprise weekend getaways, picking out thoughtful little gifts just to show her how much she meant to me. She'd flash a grin and say, "Ah, that's nice," but she never lifted a finger to reciprocate. She didn't even try. If something shinier caught her eye, like a friend's party, a fancy dinner invite, or some event she couldn't miss, she'd ditch our plans without a second thought, leaving me to shrug it off. I'd convince myself it was just who she was, free-spirited, not heartless, not mean. She'd still peck me on the cheek each morning, still toss out an "I love you" here and there, so I clung to that. But love's not just a bunch of sweet words, it's what you do, and her actions screamed a truth I didn't want to face. The moment it all clicked wasn't some big, Hollywood-style blowout. No yelling, no slamming doors, just a simple chat that laid everything bare. It was a random Monday night, and we were sitting down to dinner after I'd slogged through a brutal day of nonstop meetings, juggling deadlines, fueled by caffeine and stubborn grit. Even though I was wiped out from the day, I couldn't wait to tell Margaret about something big. My excitement was buzzing. After months of grinding, the project I'd poured my heart into was finally shaping up, and I was eager to share the news with her, picturing her beaming with pride, or at least showing she cared. Turns out, I misread that one completely. She didn't give a hoot. There she was, sitting across the table from me, her fork poking at her food like it was a chore, her eyes locked on her phone screen instead of me. I kept chatting anyway, hoping she'd snap out of it and look my way eventually. "So, if this deal goes through, it could change everything," I said, my voice picking up. "We're talking six-figure commissions here, the biggest contract I've ever landed." Nothing. Not a peep from her. I snuck a glance her way, and there she was, scrolling mindlessly, her face lit up by that harsh blue glow from her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen, tapping out messages, totally checked out from where we were. "Margaret," I tried again, a little louder this time, desperate to pull her back to me. She let out a lazy hum, barely a sound, no meaning behind it. Then a quick giggle slipped out, not because of me or my story, but at whatever was cracking her up online. She grinned down at her phone, typing away, lost in some exchange that had zero to do with us. Mid-sentence, I just stopped talking, my words hanging in the air, unnoticed. Time ticked by, 10 seconds, 20, 30, and she didn't even flinch. I set my fork down, staring at her, waiting. Finally, she flicked her eyes up. Oh, sorry. What were you saying? She mumbled, her tone flat, like it didn't matter one bit. I let out a soft breath, barely holding it together. You didn't catch a single thing I said, did you? She sighed, locking her phone with an annoyed little huff. Jeremy, I was just glancing at something. Why do you always turn nothing into a huge deal? I locked eyes with her, stunned. Nothing? I echoed, my voice quiet but sharp. She leaned back, crossing her arms like she was done with me already. Why does every little thing have to revolve around you? She shot back. A dry chuckle slipped out of me, no joy in it, just disbelief. That's rich, Margaret, considering I've spent years making everything about you. She rolled her eyes, brushing me off. Oh, here we go again. I pressed on, my patience thinning. Tell me, when's the last time you actually tried, planned something? Made me feel like I wasn't invisible to you? She sighed again, shaking her head like I was the unreasonable one. Jeremy, not everything's gotta be so heavy. You act like I owe you proof of something every day. I sat there, staring, hoping she'd toss me a crumb, some word, some gesture to show I was wrong about her. Instead, she just shrugged, her voice turning icy and distant. Look, you're just not my priority anymore. The silence that followed felt like it was choking me, thick and heavy. I gave her a single nod, sliding my chair back. Okay, I said, just that, no shouting, no arguing, just the truth sinking in. I carried my plate to the sink, scrubbed my hands clean, and trudged upstairs, feeling the weight of it all. She didn't come after me, didn't call out, didn't even try to patch things up, she just let me go. That night, lying in bed, I turned my head to look at her silhouette, racking my brain for the last time she'd made me feel truly wanted. I drew a blank, and that empty space told me everything I needed to know. By that point, I'd figured out exactly what needed to happen next. The following morning, I rolled out of bed before the alarm even had a chance to blare, while Margaret snoozed beside me, her breaths calm and even, like nothing in her world was off-kilter. She slept so peacefully you'd never guess she'd spent years nudging me further and further out of her life. For a minute, I just lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the heaviness of it all pinning me down like a stack of bricks. Then I shifted my gaze to her, the woman I once swore would be my forever, the one I'd handed my entire heart to, and realized she looked familiar, but something had changed, or maybe I was just waking up to who she'd always been. I let out a long breath, done with waiting around, finished with hoping she'd one day open her eyes and see we had something worth holding on to. I climbed out of bed, threw on some clothes, and snatched my keys, moving like it was any old morning, like I was just popping out to the office and would stroll back later. Except I wasn't headed to work, and I sure wasn't coming back. Instead, I pointed my car toward a lawyer's office, walked in, and let the words spill out. I want a divorce. They sounded strange rolling off my tongue, but deep down, they fit just right. I wasn't there to plead or haggle or try to fix her. I was there to walk away. We hashed out the details, divvying up the house, the bank accounts, all the legal stuff, and I made it crystal clear I wasn't about to let this mess leave me high and dry. By the time I stepped out of that office, the wheels were turning, papers in progress, and I wasn't second-guessing a thing. When I got back to the house that afternoon, it was silent. Margaret was nowhere in sight, probably sipping lattes with her buddies, giggling over something trivial, clueless that her world was about to flip upside down. I didn't hurry. I strolled to the closet, dragged out a suitcase, and started packing every shirt, every book, every little piece of me that had been tied to that place. I tucked away. There was no rush in my steps, no fury or tears, just a quiet sense of this being the end. When I zipped up the final bag, the house already felt hollow, like I'd never truly fit there to begin with. I wandered into the kitchen, slid my wedding ring off my finger, and set it down on the counter. The faint clink of metal rang out louder than I expected in the stillness. Then I grabbed a pen and a notepad from the drawer, scribbled a quick line. If I don't matter to you, then you don't matter to me anymore either. I left it next to the ring, took one last glance around the place, and headed for the door. No slamming, no lingering looks back, just me stepping out and leaving it behind. That night, I checked into a hotel, half expecting a wave of guilt or sorrow to hit me, maybe even a flicker of doubt, but all I felt was a strange, lifting relief. Margaret, though? She flipped out completely. A few hours later, my phone lit up like crazy calls, texts pouring in. Jeremy, how could you do this? You're abandoning me? Are you out of your mind? You think you can just ditch me like this? I'll make sure you lose everything. I let her calls and texts go unanswered, not bothering to engage. 3 days later, The divorce papers landed in her hands, and that's when the real chaos kicked off. At first, she painted herself as the wounded party. Our shared friends started ringing me up, curious about what went down, saying she claimed I'd blindsided her out of nowhere. My buddy Alan called one afternoon, relaying her story. She's telling everyone she had no clue you were unhappy. She says you just up and ditched her. I let out a dry chuckle, no humor in it, because Margaret was a pro at spinning the narrative, but I didn't waste my breath setting the record straight. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. When her pity party didn't pan out, she flipped the script, unleashing a storm of threats that grew nastier by the day. Her messages turned sharp and bitter. You really think you'll get off easy? I'll make you sorry you ever tried this. Jeremy, you're not escaping unscathed. I'll take it all. And she gave it her best shot, gunning for half my savings, the house, even my car, like she could claw her way to victory. Thing is, she didn't see me coming. My lawyer had locked everything down tight before I even stepped out that door. My finances shielded, my assets untouchable, leaving her with no cards to play. I told my lawyer if she wants the house that bad, she can pay me my share, but deep down, I knew she didn't have the cash. She never did. While the divorce mess dragged on, I got busy piecing my life back together, starting with a new apartment, not some swanky place, just a simple spot that was mine alone, free of echoes from someone who'd made me feel invisible. For the first time in forever, I focused on myself, hitting the gym again, taking trips I'd always wanted to, catching up with old pals I'd let slip away while I was too busy bending over backwards for Margaret. Then one night, I met Caroline. No big cinematic moment, no fireworks or instant romance, just a casual chat that happened naturally. We bumped into each other at a coffee shop, swapped a few words, and something about it just felt right, easy. No games, no guessing where I stood with her. We didn't rush into anything. I wasn't in a hurry to dive headfirst into a serious relationship, and she was cool with taking it slow, respecting my pace. But as the months rolled by, what we had grew into something deeper, and unlike Margaret, Caroline actually showed up for me. She'd listen when I talked, get excited about plans I made, and check in after a rough day, not because she wanted something, but because she genuinely cared. For once, I wasn't just some backup plan in someone's life. I was the one they picked, and that feeling was new and real. Time ticked on, and the divorce fight finally wrapped up. Margaret had battled hard, dead set on draining me dry, thinking she'd come out on top. But when the judge sided with me, ruling she wouldn't get the house, couldn't touch my savings, and was left with way less than she'd banked on, I saw the truth hit her, panic and desperation flashing across her face. She'd spent months trying to tear me down, but all she'd done was unravel her own life in the process. When I walked out of that courthouse, a grin spread across my face, and there, waiting for me in the warm sunlight, was Caroline, steady, real, and exactly where I needed her to be. Caroline lifted her gaze, caught my eyes, and flashed a warm smile my way. I stepped toward her, sliding an arm around her waist, feeling lighter than I had in years. All finished? She asked gently, her voice soft and steady. Before I could answer, she leaned in, pressing a slow, confident kiss against my lips, sealing the moment. That's when Margaret lost it. Her voice sliced through the air like a thunderclap, yelling, "You jerk." Before I could even process it, she charged toward us, her face contorted with pure fury, her sights set on Caroline. In a flash, Margaret lunged, grabbing Caroline's hair and jerking her back, shrieking, "Stay away from my husband, you!" A security guard swooped in fast, yanking Margaret away within seconds, though she flailed like a cornered animal, refusing to go quietly. Caroline staggered, catching her balance, her eyes wide with shock as I jumped in front of her, blocking her from the madness. Margaret kept thrashing against the guard's hold, her face flushed red, screaming, "You don't get to just swap me out. You think you can walk away from everything we had, everything I gave you?" I looked at her, cool and unshaken, my voice firm as I said, "It's done, Margaret, let it go and move forward." Her breath caught, and right then, something flickered in her eyes, not just rage, but a hint of dread, like she finally understood I wasn't turning back. She'd lost me for good. Months rolled by after that, and Margaret slipped into the background of my life, fading like an old photo that doesn't mean much anymore. Caroline had moved in with me by then, not some hasty choice, but a natural step, because nothing about us ever felt forced. She just clicked into my world in a way Margaret never could. Living with her was simple, calm, no constant tension, no tiptoeing around, no scrambling to prove I was worth her time. It was the kind of peace I hadn't known in years. As for Margaret, bits of gossip trickled in now and then. She'd date someone new, but it'd fizzle out quick, never lasting more than a handful of weeks. Those friends she'd always put above me, they'd moved on too, wrapped up in their own lives, leaving her behind. The house she'd battled so hard to keep. She couldn't scrape together the money to buy my half, so we sold it, and when the dust settled, she ended up with way less than she'd hoped for. Part of me thought I'd feel guilty, but I didn't. She'd picked her path, and now she was stuck with the consequences. Then one night, as I lay in bed, drifting toward sleep, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me back. Caroline was nestled beside me, her breath soft and even, her presence steady as always. I almost ignored the vibration, ready to let sleep take me, but it buzzed again, and some gut feeling nudged me to check. I grabbed the phone, squinting at the glow, one new message from Margaret. I hesitated for a beat before opening it, and there it was. I messed up. I'm sorry. Please give me another shot. Simple, raw, no tricks or venom, just a last-ditch plea. I read it twice, letting the words sink in, then deleted it without a second thought. No reply, no emotion, just gone. Some folks don't earn a do-over, and me? I'd finally landed in the happiness I'd been chasing all along, and I wasn't about to let it slip away.